there's a point in my life where I struggled with regulating my nervous system, feeling feelings that I didn't want to feel a lot, like anger, rage, anxiety, fear, guilt. And this never really happened to me before. Like, I was always the calm, cool, collected guy in my mind and to others around me. Like, it was just clear that I was a calm, cool, collected guy. But there was a time in my life, I'd say 2022, 2021, where I really felt like I was losing myself at my core. Like, I was losing me because I moved to a new city. I was building a business, didn't have a job, didn't have a steady income. Um, I was, I now have at that time it was new to me having a daughter. Then I had a son on the way. Again, in a new city. I moved with my girlfriend, now wife, at the time, and it seemed like there was a lot of stuff going on all at one time that I just did not feel ready for. I just didn't feel ready for it by any stretch of the imagination. But I thought that eventually I'd be able to just cope with it. And that was true for the most part, but I had to do way more work than I thought. Like, I wasn't waking up in a rush and in a panic all the time, but there'd be times where I'm just like walking around and I'm like, you have another kid coming, what are you gonna do? And it felt like life was just grabbing me up. It's like, what are you gonna do? And then it just made me fearful. Like I was under way more fear than I ever thought was possible, because as I'm just moseying on through life, I'm realizing that I'm gonna have to take care of another person, and not just myself. Even though I'm just trying to figure out how to take care of myself in general, now I'm adding another person to the mix. And not only am I adding another person to the mix, I still don't have predictable, consistent income coming in. And now I have to look after another person, and they're looking at me and I'm looking back at them. Not to mention that at this time, everything income wise is going okay. It's not great, it's not terrible, but it's going all right. But there are no indications to say that when we add more expenses, everything's going to be going all right. So you know how it is when you're adding more expenses than you think that you're going to be prepared for. That's going to shock anybody, right? Especially when you're doing it, and this is a business that you just started, really, in 2021, November, right? And you've made a decision that you're just going to stick it out and finally figure this shit out. And it was very scary, very, very scary. And not only that, but at times when it wasn't going well, I felt guilt. I felt fear, a lot of fear. Like, what am I gonna do? Like, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? Like, what am I gonna do if everything goes wrong? What am I gonna do if one thing goes wrong? Like, I just couldn't, like, as much as I was for the most part feeling calm, cool, and collected, there were those times where I felt like I was just spiraling, and it was happening way more often than I would like to even admit. And I was already doing massage work and body work, and I started getting more into nervous system regulation, because I was like, I'll dive into this stuff, nervous system regulation and fascia work, right? I was doing some before, but I didn't realize the depth that you could really go with the nervous system, applied neurology, and just overall working with the fascial system. I didn't realize it went that deep. So I started doing a deep dive into all that stuff, and I realized, like, hey, I can actually fix this inside of my body, and, you know, things could be better, or at least feel better, because nothing on the outside was really changing. I wasn't any worse than I was before. I wasn't any better. Everything was kind of staying the same. I didn't have any actual panic, but in my mind, my brain was panicking like a mother. Like, my brain was panicking a lot. And I was never anybody that really ran to substances or anything like that. So and anytime I feel discomfort, I actually, like, I try to sit with it as much as possible to try to understand it. So in sitting with it, what I started to realize was I was actually feeling more of that pain, discomfort, whatever you want to call that. I was actually feeling that a lot more in my body than in my head. Like, I thought it was the thoughts that were just running, but I was like going throughout my regular day. I wasn't really thinking about it, but somehow in my body, I just felt like trapped, right? And what I noticed was, like, these anger, fear, shame, guilt, all of those things, they were living in my body. Like, I started to realize that, especially anger, like, if I were to get angry about something, which wasn't really that much, but, like, I would realize, because I would never notice tightness any other time, I would notice anytime I'd get anger, I would tense my jaw, and I'd like tighten my neck, right? And it was almost like I was biting my tongue so I don't, like, lash out and say something that I'll regret, right? It was like that kind of pattern. And I started to notice that that was a pattern inside of me. And I noticed that, like, fear and anxiety was, I would get like a pit or a knot in my stomach, and I would feel like tightness around my hips and my low back area. So I started realizing that when I start feeling certain emotions, like, one, I was naming them, because before I was just like, I just feel this uncomfortable feeling in my body. And I was able to name them. That helped. But then I was realizing that I was actually having a whole experience. Like, it wasn't just like, hey, I'm thinking something. It was like, no, it was almost like my body was reliving in the worst case scenario that's happening right then and there. It was like, when I was fearful, it was like somebody was coming up to me with a knife or a gun at gunpoint, and I'm sitting there like, oh my God, I'm about to lose my life, when it's not happening at all. But I was experiencing that like a full body experience multiple times a day. And I was wondering, like, you know, what is this? So I started diving deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And now we come to, 2026, and I ended up writing a whole book about it, it's called Held Together, Not Holding On, and it's about your nervous system and about trying to figure out your nervous system. You figuring out your nervous system, not going to somebody else and outsourcing it, even though that's great, but you're going to be the one to actually start to notice the things that happen with your nervous system. Once you're aware of what starts to happen inside of your body, you can do something about it. But if you never become aware of what you can do, or what's happening inside of your body, you'll never get to the bottom of it. You'll never get to the bottom of it. So what I did was I started to notice, hey, that pit in my stomach, it actually feels like a tightening. So what could I do about that? A couple different things. One thing that I noticed that I could do is slow down my breathing. When I slowed down my breathing, this changed a lot. It was like I came to this moment and I could stop catastrophizing and thinking 10 steps ahead, right? Because I felt like whenever I was in those panic modes of feeling, fear, anger, shame, guilt, it was never happening that moment. It was always me projecting it, or me thinking about the past and how that affected me then. It was never what I'm actually doing right now. Like, I'd be sitting down doing nothing and all of a sudden get hit with it. So like, I was never actually living right here in this moment. And I started to realize that. So I started to study, like, hey, how do you actually get back to what's going on here and now, instead of, you know, 10 days from now, 12 days from now, a year down the line, right? And what I noticed, the biggest thing that I noticed was my breathing. When I slowed my breathing down, and here's what I mean by slowed my breathing down, because I'm like super analytical, right? Slowed my breathing down. I literally had a breath cadence of 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out, specifically. That's the specific breath cadence that I use to this day and what I used in the past. 4-second inhale, 6-second exhale helped me out tremendously. I started realizing that if you start breathing under 12 times a minute, I did the research and all this stuff, right? You start to go back into your parasympathetic nervous system state. This is your rest and digest. If you are breathing over 12 times a minute, 13, 14, 15, blah, 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 right? Then you're in the sympathetic nervous system state. This means that you can be in anger, fear, shame, guilt, those type of emotions, fight or flight response, right? You can be in that state, and that's where those emotions come from. However, if your breath cadence doesn't ever get there, those thoughts, that literal body chemistry inside of you doesn't happen. It can't happen just because your body chemistry cannot hold that. You cannot be in a Zen place experiencing anger, fear, shame, guilt. It doesn't exist. It can't happen at the same time. So what I noticed was, what are the things that are going to the things that I could do to bring me back to the present moment. But then also, just because you come back to the present moment, and I realize this a lot, right? Just because you come back to the present moment doesn't mean that experience that you're trying to essentially run away from or not experience, it doesn't mean that that goes away. It still might live inside of your body, which is why I created the entire book, because it starts to go into what can you do long term, right? And how could you actually start to make actual changes long term to what's going on inside your body, and really start to change how you operate on a day-to-day. Sure, you could do a breathing once in a while, but that's a band-aid to help you right now, so that you can actually change your mindset and shift so that you can do the work, because you can't do the work if you're in a panic state. But just changing your breathing rate is not going to work, because you're not going to be consciously breathing all day. Right? Like it's just not something that you're gonna do. But another thing that I realized was that all these emotions lived inside of my body, and an emotion is energy in motion. So an emotion may get stuck inside your body. That energy inside of your body gets stuck in a loop. In a cycle. The loop in the cycle might just be here, and you constantly start experiencing that loop in that cycle at a low level all day, every day. And if you don't get rid of that loop in that cycle, what's going to happen is you're going to experientially start living that loop over and 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 over again, and you'll never be able to get out of that cycle. So there are many things that you can do, but in general, we have to realize that the issues live in your tissues. They don't just live up here in your brain. Just remember, when you are having an experience of anger, fear, shame, guilt, any other negative emotions, I just tend to deal with people with those a lot, and I deal with that myself, right? Those are the negative experiences that I have. When I realize that I have those, I feel them inside of my body, as well as joy, happiness, elation, right? I experience those as well. So the first key is to becoming aware of exactly what it is that you're feeling. So you have to sit with it. Stop trying to run away from everything. Sit with it. You're feeling fearful. Sit in the fear. See where it's coming from. Not necessarily the event that's causing it, but in your body, where is it coming from? Because sometimes you feel fear and you have no idea where it's coming from, but you feel it inside of your body. That's something you can do something about that. You don't need to know exactly where the fear, the anger, the shame, the guilt is. You don't need to worry. You don't need to figure out exactly, did your third grade teacher do that? Did your mom yell at you too much? Did your dad smack you around? You don't need to worry about that. You don't need to constantly bring up those traumas. You just need to be aware enough of your own body to know that you have these cycles and situations going on. Once you become aware of them, now you can do something about them. Now you can calm your nervous system down. So when you do that, it is constantly restarting and constantly interrupting that pattern. When you interrupt the pattern enough, then you can actually finish and close the loop. That's what happens most of the time, is when we get stuck in these stressful and threatening positions. We get stuck in the cycle because the cycle never ended. We started a cycle and it never ended. And here's what I mean by it never ended, okay? When you get stuck in a cycle, and let me see if I could get a little bit more light here, maybe over here, right? So when you get stuck in a cycle, here's what I mean, okay? Whenever you have a threat or a fight or flight response, whatever you want to call it, right? Whenever you have that happen to you, your body chemistry changes. What does this mean? Your body chemistry changes to the ability for you to fight or flight. So this means that your body now changes so that you have the extra energy to fight something off or run from it because your body's feeling threatened. This threat could be an email, it could be a text message, it could be a fight with somebody that's not physical, right? But when your body feels this threat, it gears up to fight. So it gears up, it gives you all the adrenaline, all the blood stops going from the core and goes to the extremities to fight off somebody, or, you know, get the feet going, right? Right? So that happens when you get a text message, when you get an email, when you have an argument with somebody, when you have financial stress or struggle, right? And that happens over and over and over again. And your body starts to live in that, right? And when your body begins to live in that state over and over and over again, when your body starts to live in that state over and over and over again, it starts to remember that state. And not only does it start to remember that state, you now are living an incomplete cycle because you geared up to fight, but there was no fight. So all that energy that you built up doesn't go anywhere. It has to dissipate now. But like I said before, emotion, energy in motion, you geared up because of that energy in motion, but now that energy that you geared up for, you have no outlet for it. So now this is like when you have a kid that has too much energy and has no outlet, they self-destruct, right? Same concept. You have all of this energy that you geared up to use, but you didn't use it. So now you start to self-destruct, right? In this case, you have that energy and it stays inside of your body. So it stays inside of your body as the form of tension, right? And that tension, depending on where it is, it starts to set a certain chemistry inside of your mind and inside of your physical habits and mental habits, that you start experiencing adverse states over and over and over and over and over again, simply because you had all of that energy and it has nowhere to go. You didn't finish the stress or threat cycle. When you finish the stress or threat cycle, when you finally finish the cycle and close the loop, your body can move on. But if you don't close the loop, your body will experience that negative comment that Sally said to you in 3rd grade over and over and over again. And what will happen is when you remember that comment, it's not going to be like you remember it here. You're going to experience it. Your palms start to sweat. Your heart rate starts to speed up. You start to clamor up. You start to actually shell up and make yourself smaller because you feel threatened, right? That's going to happen over and over and over again. And if you never get rid of that, the cycle never changes. You may go to talk therapy and you may talk about it, but if that cycle still lives inside of your body because you don't know how to actually physically extract that, then you're going to have a problem. You're gonna have a real problem, and you're gonna be best friends with your traumas, but you won't know how to tell them to leave. You're going to become best friends with your traumas. You're going to know the ins and outs, who started it, why they did it, what's going on with them. You're going to be able to tell everything about your traumas and all your situations, but you won't be able to do anything about it because you haven't actually addressed the physical part of it. And that's what I help people do, because I was experiencing that physical part of it multiple times a day. And I'm not going to say I wasn't at a debilitating level, but I could only imagine people that are at a debilitating level. Like, it was affecting me enough that it needed to be addressed. Like, it was just affecting me enough that it needed to be addressed, and I had to address it. So I could only imagine people that's been sweeping stuff under the rug for so long, and they feel that they don't need to address it because, you know, what ends up happening when you keep that cycle for too long, it becomes your personal reality, your personality. But you can change your personal reality. You can change that tension in your body. You can change that emotion. You can change that temperament. It's totally changeable. But you have to notice it's there. Then you have to finish the stress cycle. And that's what I help people do. That's what my book helps people do. And that's what the somatic work that I help people do. That's what the fascia work helps people do. I just wanted to, you know, tell a little bit about my personal stories, and then just meet you where you are. Some people may like for me, for instance, I'm a 6'3" black guy, right? In 2026. And I'm over here talking about my emotions. Like, it's just not a thing most people do. And there are, especially, people are saying, oh, you know, go to therapy, go to therapy, go to therapy. And I agree, you should go to therapy. But one of the biggest things that's missing is the physical part of the therapy. That your physical body holds on to most of that stress and that trauma and that threat feeling. And that part is never addressed in therapy. You can talk about it till the cows come home, but most of the time people still can't let it go. Even though they're best friends with their trauma, they can't open the door and say, please leave. I don't need you anymore, because your body's still holding on to it, because that's what the physiology and the chemistry is inside of your body. But that can totally be changed. That can totally be changed if you just start paying attention to it. If you start noticing certain things. All of that stuff you can learn in my book and in some of the classes that I teach. Down below, I'll link the how to release anger video, because that will help so many people out. The how to release anger video, because it shows you where the pent up stress and tension is, and yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. But that's all I got. Peace. Much love to you guys.